I think we're ready to go. So thank you so much for coming to our History Pub. I'm Alicia with the McMenamins History Department, and it is our great joy to have our History Pub here at Kennedy School every last Monday of the month. So while I have you here, I just want to let you know, since we have this every month, that you might see a flyer on some of your tables. This is what we're having come to Kennedy School next Monday, February 23rd. So we are partnering with Oregon Historical Society and the Oregon Black Pioneers, and we are showing another documentary called Big Medicine, York Outdoors, which is about the Lewis and Clark expedition, and York, who was a member of that expedition, but was an enslaved man by William Clark, actually. But the documentary is very interesting because it follows the trail. So a bunch of adventurers, including Zachary Stocks, the executive director, Oregon Black Pioneers, who was a film participant. So if you're interested in that or finding out about all our other history pubs, you can go to mcmenamins.com/history or find us on Facebook and Instagram. So thank you for indulging me there. We're very, very happy to partner with Japanese American Museum of Oregon and North Shore Productions for this special screening. And we are going to, after the film, have a panel discussion with some very distinguished guests as well. So please stick around for that. Let's get started with the film here. So thank you very much.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for coming out tonight. We're going to start our panel discussion. We have some very great speakers up here who's going to be telling us a little bit more. And we are going to open up things to the audience for Q&A, so start thinking about some questions. We only have about 6 questions for the panelists, and then we'll move on to the general public. So we have the Honorable Mike Honda, who is the former representative of California District 17, out in Mountain View, right? And San Jose, oh, sorry. So yeah, he's a civil rights activist, been doing a lot in the community, and is now a resident of Oregon. So yeah, right, or no? Yes, and then also, he was formerly incarcerated at Amache, so he's our survivor on this panel. Next to me is Josh Banyard. He is the producer and director of this film. He's an Emmy Award-winning director, so yeah. And then next we have John Hasegawa. He's an associate professor over at Mount Hood Community College, and he is the head of the ceramics department. And a fun note, at least for those who know what the 8HO, which is this book of names, he did the ceramic part of that. And so yeah, he did great work on that. And then lastly, at the end, we have Lynn Fujigami Parks, who's my predecessor. She's the former executive director of the Japanese American Museum of Oregon. And she's a descendant of Amache, as well as John. And her uncle is Bob Fujigami, who was featured in the film. So yeah, so this is our panelist today, and I'll introduce myself. I'm Hanako Wakatsuki-jong. I'm the executive director of the Japanese American Museum of Oregon. And my connection to Amache is that when I was working for the National Park Service, I was actually working on the special resource study for this to help get it to become a National Historic Park within the park sites. Yeah, yes. Anyways, so we're gonna first start off with a question for the filmmaker. So, Josh, what drew you to this particular story now? And what surprised you the most during the filmmaking process about how survivors and their descendants are choosing to engage with this story through archaeology, activism, and other means?
Sure. Well, I think first why we made the film is we originally conceived of this in 2020, so it was roughly the end of Trump's first term. And it had a really relevance to the immigration roundups, to a lot of actions his federal government was taking that had direct parallels, but also we were losing or beginning to lose the last generation of primary story holders for Amache. Very sadly, we've lost some of the interviewees you saw in the film since that time, but it was a real now or never situation for first-person experiences, and it was a story that had not been told fully and something we wanted to capture while there was still time. And there was a big push within the Japanese American community to make Amache a national park, which has since succeeded. But at the time, we were really trying to support that effort. And to that end, this film now plays at the national park and it is there daily for interpretation. I think what surprised me the most probably was the power of place in like surfacing repressed memory. Amache is pretty unique amongst the camps in that all of the foundations of the barracks are poured concrete. And so the camp layout is preserved in a way that is not true for almost any of the other camps. Those sites are largely transformed into farmland or other landscapes, and Amache is really still exactly as it was. The buildings are gone, but the streets are there, the gridded layout is there, the foundations are there, and you can walk with survivors to their barrack, to their home where they lived for years, and they have their sort of canned memories that when you interview them in their homes or other places that aren't Amache, they have, these are the stories I tell. But you take them to their foundation, to their home, and suddenly they're like, oh, I remember taking a bath with my mom here and her just staring at the ceiling. Or, you know, and one of them, Carlene, who's fantastic in the film, talks about it's like peeling back layers of an onion. Like every time she comes to camp, it's like another layer of the onion is revealed. So I think that was probably the most surprising. But I think what was most impressive was the community coming together and saying, this happened to us. Nobody stood up for us. There was no one in the wider American community who said, this is wrong. But this did happen to us, and so now we're going to stand up and we're going to say something so it doesn't happen to other communities. And I think that was incredibly powerful.
Well, awesome. Like, and thinking about the power of place and the importance of that and how it brings back all the memories, right? Yeah, that's awesome that you're able to capture all of that. So the next question is going to be for Mike, Lynn, and John. Sorry. The film shows how people in Amache created beauty and community despite impossible circumstances. What role do you think remembering plays in healing from this injustice? And what are you hoping the next generation for the American public takes on this story? So, I don't know. We'll start off with, okay. We'll start off with Lynn, if that's okay, because Mike
Sure.
said so.
I had to collect myself, watching the film, and it just brings so much back. And so I do have some notes, luckily. First of all, I just want to make clear that this is American history. This is an American story. But to fully understand it, I think it's helpful to maybe get some insight as far as the beliefs and the values of the Japanese American community. And the film touches on this. One, gaman, meaning perseverance. And in this case, it was enduring the unbearable with dignity and grace. So it was just never giving up. This is a story of perseverance and resilience. The other one that they also talked about was shikattaganai, it can't be helped, meaning that you make the best of your situation. You move on, you move forward. And this was very much the case of how they were able to, for example, create beauty in the camps, making the best of the situation, creating beauty in the harshest of both physical and human conditions. Another one, kodomo no tameni, meaning for the sake of the children. Everything was done for the sake of the children. It was creating a sense of normalcy. And that, they talked about establishing, it was like it was a town. They were trying to protect the youth and the children from this horrible experience. And then another one, okage samade, which loosely translated means, this speaks more to legacy. I am what I am because of you. So, you realize, for example, we would not have had the life that we have had it not been for this experience and how our community was able to get through this. We stood on their shoulders. It's what got me through so many hard times and really inspired me to do the work that I did and continue to do. It inspired my father to become an attorney. So you talk about memory, and you can't remember something if you have no knowledge of it, and that was part of the issue. It's just not, this is history that's not shared. It's not known. It was not taught in the schools when I was growing up. When my kids were growing up, there might have been one paragraph in the history books. And so it's so important to be able to share this history, to educate the public, to do these kinds of events. And this is where the healing takes place. Healing can't take place unless your story is known, it's shared, you're seen, you're heard, and your story of survival is recognized and uplifted. So that's, you know, we look at what's happening today, and the soul of our country is being tested. Our memory is being tested, and that's why we need to remember what's happened. We cannot let history repeat itself. And we are seeing that happening today.
Wow. Okay. John Hasegawa. So my mother was in camp, and I'm what we call a third generation or a sansei, and Japanese name their generations like that. I'm pretty young for a sansei, so that means my grandparents were part of the group that were immigrated from Japan to here, and being in this unique spot, it's been very interesting to see how my grandmother talked about camp versus my mom, and then how I feel about camp as well. So when I was growing up, they would not talk about, my grandmother would not talk about camp. It was seen as a shameful experience, being from Japan and being kind of raised in this more noble thing, like a surrender or being dishonored was like disgraceful to your family. So they would not, she wouldn't even talk about it. And then that kind of rubbed off onto my mom. There was a little bit of anger, but they definitely did, she didn't want to really linger on the topic or talk about it that much. And this is when I was growing up. So one year we went to visit Manzanar. We drove out of our way, we were driving through California. And so we looked at it. This is a long time ago, this was probably back in the 80s. Not much was there, right? And we hung out for a little bit and we left. And then I remember as we were leaving and trying to go to the next road trip place, it was like, well, why don't we go to Amache maybe and check that place out? And this is maybe early 80s or late 70s. They said, no, wait, why would we ever want to go there and visit that place? Years later, right, this is many years later, we're having a discussion, and Mitch, who was in the video, was talking about he was going to go to Amache, and my mom and uncle, and they were like, let's all go, right? And that took many years, like it was 60 years before they went and acknowledged that they wanted to go back and visit this place where they were imprisoned. Right, and so I got the privilege of going with Mitch, who was in the video, and I went when I heard they were going. Like, I'm going, baby. And then my uncle and my two uncles and my mom, so they were the surviving Amache survivors from my family. We all went and we stood on the site, and just like we saw in the movie that they were remembering things together, it was really interesting how I could see this transformation happening in with them, and for Japanese, for our culture, like, we never need healing, we can sustain, right? We have all these power words about strength and perseverance. Like, you could see this change happening within them, happening at that site, right? They're remembering both the good things and the bad things, but very strangely enough, we only heard about the bad things, about how bad the food was and all this, but they were actually pointing out, this is what it was like when we walked over here, this is more like the way this building was. It was an incredible experience to watch it collectively happen within my family group, and just to be standing there with them was very enlightening and kind of transformative for me. It was just a great experience to visit that site. And for a culture, for me, Japanese just are not into the healing thing that much. Just, I don't know, historically, I don't know, it's like a thing, we just persevere, right? There is no self-help book, right, for us, really. I don't know if the Japanese will get that or not, but that's just the way we are, and to watch it actually happen and for them to acknowledge that and it happening right there in front of us. I don't think they knew that's what was happening, but I could see it being born and raised here in a very American style. I could see it happening, and it was very powerful.
Mike?
Thank you. Can you hear me back there? Louder? Okay, you can hear. Okay. My name is Mike Honda. My birth certificate was Makoto Honda. born June 27th, 1941, which is about 5 months before December 7th, 1941. And so after my father signed the birth certificate, he called me Michael because he was a romantic, Michael the Archangel. And my brother was Masato, he called him Arthur, King Arthur. And my sister Naomi, a biblical name. But when we went to camp, I was redesignated as number 32668, C. The C stood for enemy alien. And I got renamed by my government. And so the things I talk about, Amache, basically comes from reflections and memory. Because when I shared my dreams with my parents as I grew up in Chicago after the war, I tell them what my dream was. My mother would look at me and say, "That happened." And I said, "Yeah, I could only see this high, so I saw knees and feet and dust and boardwalks." But she said, all these things happened. So the recollection was coming back to me. She thought, this boy is strange. But it brought back memories. And so my sharing is from reflections and also from cogitating on the things that I reflected upon. What I want to share tonight basically is giving credit to folks who have educated our country since 1941. Right after the war, we knew that Earl Warren, who was the Chief Justice after a while, he was running for governor as an attorney general, and he wanted the Japs off the West Coast. So he used that as political rhetoric in order to run for governor. And then, but there was some heroes in California, one. But when they had the vote to have the Assembly and the State Senate vote on relocating or moving the Japanese folks to the interior, there was one state senator and later became a judge. His name was Ralph Dills. He was raised in Gardena, California, where predominantly a lot of Japanese Americans were there. So he knew these folks. And he was also given tuition money by a friend of his who was Japanese American so he can go to college and then eventually to law school. So we had allies at the time, but they're far and few between. We had the northern chapter of the ACLU, but that was it. The rest were gone. And here's the point. 40 some odd years later, in 1988, we got a bill called HR 442, which had the government recognize the mistake of the incarceration. And President Reagan signed it, and he said that, we're all Americans, this should have never happened. But the fact that it got there in 1988 was through the work of local grassroots people, many of them from Portland and Mount Hood, outside of Seattle, outside of Sacramento. These folks fomented the movement. And so it made the policymakers, like our Congressman Norm Mineta, carry the bill, sustain him in Congress, and then get other people to help him pass that bill. And the guy that really pushed it at that level, at the community level, was a guy named Dr. Edison Uno, whose father was expatriated from Peru by the Department of Justice to be sent to a DOJ camp in Crystal City, Texas. And so these are the stories of warriors who at the grassroots level that make these happen. So it's bottoms up. And today, when I think about Amache, think about incarceration, I think about the reason why our community leaders were rounded up without due process and equal protection was the Alien Enemy Act of 1798, which Trump, I don't know what your politics are, but since you're here, I'm taking advantage of you. Which Trump literally said out loud in public that he was using that to round up youngsters immigrants, documented and undocumented, using that law to round these folks up, and then, bring it to confrontation between community and the government. The difference between 1941 and 2025, 2026 is knowledge and the commitment of people acting on their knowledge. And that's why folks like yourself who are here today make it possible for folks to be able to speak up, stand up, and fight back. And I think that that's the power of this story tonight and the power of you being here tonight. And I think that communities like yourselves, if they were as knowledgeable as you are today, then in 41, the likelihood of incarceration might have not been. And maybe FDR would listen to his wife Eleanor and say, that's a bad idea. So I just want to say thank you.
Well, this next question is going to be for the full panel, but as Mike mentioned, he spoke about the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, and that was an apology, or led to apology and reparations from the government. And obviously this trauma still persists across generations within my community. So what do you all think it would take for genuine reconciliation beyond an official apology? And what role can cultural memory and historical sites like Amache play in the process? Who would like to go first? Lynn?
Keep it going. First of all, the apology actually meant more to the Japanese American community probably than any form of restitution or financial restitution, the reparations. I mean, it's like, thank you. Mitch said, in the movie or the film, my grandfather's life was worth more than $20,000. So it was really the apology, the acknowledgement that the government was wrong, that it wasn't, military necessity for national security, but it was war hysteria, racial prejudice, and a failure of political leadership. This was so important that this apology was made. But then an apology is empty and meaningless as long as the wrongdoing and the injustice continues, as we are seeing happening today. We see fear and prejudice and hate just on the rise and being given a platform. And we're seeing ICE, taking people from their cars, their homes, no due process, no warrants. And this is just a trigger, because this is what happened to our community during World War II. And then when you see the Supreme Court upholding and allowing ICE to basically target people based on their language, their appearance, their race, this is legalized racial profiling and legalized racism. Again, it's just a trigger, and we relive the injustice all over again. I had something that triggered me personally recently. I don't know if any of you saw that video of the little Asian boy who, his team had just won, it's like a 2-month-long soccer tournament, and instead of being excited and happy, he was crying. It showed him crying in his car, and it was the result of being bullied on the soccer field. And he was being harassed, the kids were saying, you're an illegal, immigrant. And the government, he actually mentioned Trump by name, Trump is gonna come get you, take you away, and remove you, and you're gonna be sent back to, where you belong, which was not here. And for me, that just immediately triggered something that happened to me. I can remember distinctly the first time I was called a Jap, and slant eyes, and you don't belong here. I was in grade school. I was young, and I never thought of myself being different. You know, I was an American. I was born here. And I just never felt anything other than that until I had this hate levied at me. And I can still feel my blood rush to my face and the heat, how hot my face got. And I felt shame, and I had no reason to be ashamed. It was just because, you know, being othered and having, again, this just hate directed at you. So for true healing and reconciliation, again, we can't have this history being repeated. And then to speak to the importance of historic sites like Amache. Amache is basically a large, huge artifact. So it's irreplaceable evidence to interpret this history. It's a tangible and powerful emotional conduit to really bring stories and history to life. It connects the past with the present, and it connects past, present, and future generations. And this is why it's so, so very important that this history and these sites are protected. And right now, I mean, last year, one of the first executive orders that was signed was restoring truth and sanity to American history. And basically, I mean, we just saw evidence of this recently when they removed, this is in Philadelphia, the history about the slaves that George Washington had at his house. And it's an attempt to rewrite, to erase history, to whitewash it, anything that, you know, doesn't, it's basically the removal of anything considered disparaging to the country. So all of this history is at risk. And this is why we have to stand up, prevent this erasure, and really let our voices be heard.
Well, I was going to say a lot of the same stuff there, so I'd just say good job. And I think you alluded to this, that we have modern camps, right, around the country being popped up. One is the Alligator Alcatraz, right? When I see that, I see Camp Amache, that's the place, but other internment camps, right? And these are for different people, but there are brothers and sisters, right? And so what does it really look like to me? I don't care about reparations. I just want a country where our black and brown sisters and brothers mainly, right, because they're the ones that seem to get targeted the most. I hate that happens, where they can live truly as equals, right, and really have an equal chance as all of us, as everyone else, right, at being successful, at being CEOs of companies, at really living their dream, right? We always talk about the American dream, but it seems clear that this administration is only really looking to deliver that dream for a few people, or what's going to become the new minority, right? That's what really troubles me the most, how those folks are being targeted. And that's what I really think is what the country really needs now. It feels a really long ways away right now, like the struggle is going to be really hard. But I do think it's because the pendulum has swung, right? There was Black Lives Matter and all these like beautiful movements that started, and then now the pendulum is swinging the other way, and then now it is our time to make a stand, right? By doing things like this, by great movie makers making content like this and educating us, and so that we have the guts, right, to stand up for what is right.
I second all of this. But I think on a higher level, what does genuine reconciliation look like? That's not for me to say. I have to defer to the Japanese American community for what feels genuine to you. But I think The thing to watch out for is token apologies that are performative, that are meant to silence dissent, that are meant to silence voices. Genuine apologies involve continued dialogue, a commitment to the truth, even if it is a truth we're not proud of, and continued discussion and continued memory that does not go away the day after the apology.
Yeah, I think the bill that was passed, the apology, lifted a lot of the sense of guilt or a sense of what did we do off the shoulders of a lot of the Essays, the first generation, who didn't really understand fully what was going on to them and why it was happening to them. But having said that, the apology and the reparations, although the reparations token, it's important today because when we talk about reparations, Japanese American folks have a greater responsibility to be able to argue for reparations for those things that have been done to other folks during the slavery and today. Reparation doesn't have to look like money. Reparation is left there for a definition so that we can improve society into the future and make them more knowledgeable and more American, I guess. And so I think that that's one of our responsibilities, to be able to say that we understand what that really does mean. Even though $20,000 will not bring back our parents, will not reduce the trauma, it addresses it, but it doesn't take it away. And the apology and the act of reparation is a precedent of the government to be able to look at doing that again. And it should not be an excuse by the politicians or the policymakers that, no, we can't do that. It sets a precedent. The precedent has already been set, okay? And so I think the passage of H.R. 442 was a good apology because it recognized how it happened, why it happened. That was racial bigotry, war hysteria, and a failure, like she said, the failure of political leadership, not the absence of leadership. And so that we have to have that expectation of our elected officials through the leadership of the community to make them do the things that they have to do as policymakers and do the right thing. And so we can address the trauma, but we have to also address the trauma that's being perpetrated right now. And that power and that effort is really happening at the grassroots because there's more knowledge, there's more willingness to make good trouble, like John Lewis says, and also be able to confront our government and exercise the basic responsibility of power of citizenship is to, when you disagree with the government, you have to say something and do something and expect them to respond to it. So y'all are doing great, and you're helping us address our trauma and helping us achieve a better mental health and a better concept and a higher expectation of our country and the people that we live with in our own community. So I appreciate your presence here.
Yeah, so we all have, responsibilities to hold our government accountable, right? And to hold myself accountable. Alicia, how much more time do we have? Yeah, I think we want to do some Q&A with the public, and then we'll probably finish off with one question at the end. So if you have a question, please raise your hand.
Hi, name's Andrew. Thank you for your input. I was fascinated by the community that was near the internment camp, and that there was initial hesitation and resistance, and then they got to know the people at the camp, and then they saw them as people, and they worked together. And I'm kind of curious in how. I mean, I've read of other places where this has happened, And I was wondering about the spirit of this and how we can perpetuate this idea that when we see people as people and we humanize them and we relate to them and we don't want, how can we continue this going forward?
We're going to start off with Mike.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because there's two things that come to mind right away. I visited that place like other folks had in the 70s, and nothing was being done except for one thing. There was a local high school teacher named John Hopper. As a history teacher, he said that is a logical place to teach history from, or from which to teach history. You shouldn't end a sentence with a preposition. and I met him, and he was training and teaching his students to become docents. So their knowledge and his work was way ahead of what anybody else was doing in my mind in the country. So that's one thing. Giving credit to that teacher who became more prominent in that neighborhood, but he exercised his career and really taught other youngsters, so that we have probably hundreds of kids now with a deep knowledge of what Amache is all about and how it happened. And the other one was the fact that I had a friend named Floyd Morey, who was a California State Assembly, and his roommate in the Assembly ended up being a congressman, and he was a Republican, and he was head of Ways and Means, which means he was powerful. People were afraid of him. I mean, when he didn't get his way, he got mean. So, he came in with Floyd Morey and said, we want to put a grant together to offer a grant to the community so they can use the grant to turn camps into physical representation of instruction. And that could be all the 10 camps plus the DOJ camps and other things. Well, we got that bill through after a couple of years of fighting. And the person that was bird dogging that grant and that money was Hanako. She was in the U.S., no?
It wasn't me, but it was my agency.
Her agency, but she kept us informed of what the hell was going on inside that bureaucracy. A lot of politics. People didn't want a lot of that money to leave for our purposes. But it finally got through until the point where the grants were made and the grants were provided for people to do things that Josh has been doing, educating folks through the media of the documentary, providing other people in other communities grant monies so that they can do in their camps what they're doing at Amache. And so to answer your question more directly, those are the two main things. But the other thing is, now that you know, share the information and dig deeper also, so that each one can teach one. And when each one can teach one, y'all can preach. Thank you.
I think also, just to speak to the second part of your question of, how can we take this forward? Grenada and Amache were very unique at the time, but I think it's a pretty archetypal situation where you have a small insular community and this other is coming. We've otherized the Japanese as the enemy, and they're coming en masse. This is terrifying. They're taking our farms. We have no control. They're going to dwarf us 10 to 1. And then the moment you meet them as individuals, they have a basketball court. We're going to go use their basketball court. They have a movie theater. We don't have a movie theater. We want to watch a movie, so we go to camp to watch a movie. We develop personal bonds. These are people, these are Americans, and that breaks down incredibly quickly. They're incredible farmers from the Central Valley of California. That corner of Colorado has terrible weather, terrible soil, and they grow the best cantaloupes in America because the Amache farmers taught them how in the 40s, and they are still the top melon producer. They learned a lot and economically uplifted because of the knowledge of the Amacheans. And once they met them as one-on-one, as individual to individual, all of those archetypes broke down very quickly.
And I'll just add on to that where it comes back to the human experience and it's getting to know people like what Josh is saying. Because once you kind of figure out, and if you want to study more about this history, you see that as people finally got to understand what was going on, that recognition came to light for them. So like, not at Amache, but at Minidoka in South Central Idaho, the administrator, Harry L. Stafford, at first, he was too old to join the military, so he wanted to serve his nation by becoming a bureaucrat. So he's like, I'm gonna, run one of these camps. And in his diaries, one of the things that he wrote at the very end was the most unfortunate part of Minidoka was that it was in operations. Because he recognized that, at first he thought he was doing his service to his nation, but he recognized that these are just American citizens. They were not convicted of a crime. They weren't even charged with a crime, yet they were incarcerated and denied their basic civil liberties and civil rights. And so that's why at Minidoka specifically, a lot of people say it was one of the better camps to be at, because he tried his best within the bureaucracy that he's in to try to make things better. So that's why at Minidoka they were able to grow ethnically appropriate vegetables, because there was a lot of issues with elders and trying to process the food that was given to them. So the one thing that I would just say is like, you just need to get to know the other people. Like, we may come from different walks of life, but we all have this same human experience and we all want connections. And once you start getting there, a lot of the barriers will fall apart, and then you'll be able to actually have real human connections and understand what people are going through.
I just wanted to add something. We all need to be the allies that our community did not have back then in 1942 and during World War II. And I also wanted to uplift, stories of people that were allies and did the right thing. It's interesting because we're talking about Colorado and Amache. Well, my own personal history, my mother was from Colorado, so she wasn't incarcerated. Here, my dad's incarcerated because he's from California and they lost their farm. But it happens that Governor Ralph Carr, who was governor at that time, was the only governor in the whole country that spoke up and spoke out against the incarceration. And he had a bright political future in front of him. And of course, with this speaking out and standing up really ended that career for him. But so much can be, he in the long run is going to be standing on the right side of history, unlike a lot of the electeds that we're seeing right now. But again, we need to be the allies that our community did not have. And one of the main things, this is not about marginalized communities or targeted communities. This is really about our basic fundamental human rights and the rights that are guaranteed under our Constitution. And Minoru Yasui has a great saying. I don't know if all of you know who he is. He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He's the only Oregonian to receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He initiated a test case, broke curfew in 1942 to test the constitutionality of the curfew, and was convicted, served 9 months in solitary confinement, and continued a lifetime of fighting for justice. What he said, what is done to the least of us can be done to all of us, and we need to remember that. This is what's at stake right now. We need to be standing up for our country and our democracy. We cannot let our country, we are better than this. We cannot let our country be defined by hate in its darkest moments. Now is the time. Never again is right now.
This is one of the most powerful things that I've seen, and I have seen a number of things about the Japanese incarceration and so on. And I hope that you will that is being made easily, readily available to schools so that it can be shown there. And I taught high school for a long time, social studies, so I know that it is taught, but in different ways and with different effectiveness. The story that I'm especially interested in, and I'm wondering, what is there, is the Tule Lake story, the No-No Boys. I visited there several years ago, and there was nothing. They said, here, you can look across this field and see what was there, and that was it. And it was very disappointing, and I think a movie like this that really focuses on the Tule Lake story and the No-No Boys and all of that would really be powerful. And just a quick comment. Crystal City in Texas was Japanese Americans and Italian and German Americans as well. And the German Americans and Italian Americans who were put there, I believe all of them had the opportunity to say, yes, I support the United, before they were incarcerated, or at least, but anyway, it's a very interesting place as well for different reasons.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of respond to a couple things. With Crystal City, it was a Department of Justice camp, so it's a little bit different in that aspects. And yes, there were German Americans and Italian Americans and German nationals and Italian nationals that were incarcerated there, but they were actually given due process. They were charged with a crime and they were convicted, and then they're incarcerated. Crystal City was actually a family reunification site. So if they requested their family, then they were incarcerated there. Unlike Japanese Americans and Japanese Latinos who were then kidnapped and brought into the United States, there was no due process, they were just incarcerated there. So that's just kind of the nuance with it, where this is a large, there's many facets to the incarceration story. Going back to the Tule Lake aspect, yeah, it's unfortunate, Tule Lake is still working on its development. They did just open up, I want to say within the last 2 or 3 years, a temporary visitor center in the Ditch Rider House off at the site. Unfortunately, well, I should say unfortunately. Fortunately, they have some acreage, but it's actually not on the historical footprint of the residential area, so that's why it's look over there, because they don't actually own that. They only own, I want to say it was I can't remember, it's a small percentage, 20 acres or something, that was part of the administrative area. And I should probably remember this, but a lifetime ago, I was actually their first ranger out there. So, but yeah, and Tule Lake is a little bit different because it became a segregation center in 1943 after the loyalty questionnaire to segregate those who said no to one of those 2 questions, the 27, 28. And it wasn't just those who only said no. If they said no to one of those questions, they were segregated. So Tule Lake ended up becoming the largest park, or the largest incarceration site, where I want to say 26,000 people went through that facility, and peak population was 18,000. So.
And just to speak to the education component, funnily you should mention it, a large piece of this project was developing educational curriculum units for different grade level social studies programs, which was put together by an educational curriculum team with us, and we made short films that accompany it, as well as this long film. So it is being used as a social studies unit in curriculums in Colorado and other states. And the film itself is available for streaming on PBS, so it's widely available.
And how could they access it? Is this on North Shore Productions website?
If you go to amachefilm.com, or just Google Amache and American Injustice, you will find the PBS streaming site.
Awesome. And then I also want to say the Japanese American Museum of Oregon does have a traveling trunk that talks about the Japanese American incarceration. And we do have, I think, flyers in the back if any teachers want to get access to that. So, and I think, Lynn, you had something to say?
Oh, I was just going to plug the museum again. If you want to take a deeper dive and really learn more about this history, please visit the Japanese American Museum of Oregon. It's located in what used to be a very large and vibrant Japantown. For those of you who aren't aware, Portland had a Japantown that was thriving up until they were forcibly removed and taken away. It was 10 to 12, square city blocks, what is probably known or recognized as Old Town right now, or even Chinatown. So it's an incredible place to do a lot of learning. speaking of education and learning, just a shout out, God bless the educators of this world and the teachers. You are shaping the minds of our future, the future and future leaders. So it's all about knowledge, and thank you, everyone, for being here to learn more about this history.
Well, I don't know. Do we have more questions, or I guess we could close out? Oh,
I
we could
see a
take-
hand over here.
Okay, so you'll be our last question, and then we'll close out. Oh. Okay.
First of all, thank you for being here. And my name's Larry Nakatsu. Hi, Lynn.
Hey, Larry.
Good to see you. My question's for Josh. Actually, there's several parts. Was there a lot of collaboration on your part in terms of working with other directors or producers? Because I've been to all 10 camps, and I've seen several documentaries done. Heart Mountain is a beautiful one. And I was wondering if you collaborated with any of the other producers ahead of time when you made this. And my second part of that question is, do you have a desire to make a sequel or to do some kind of work beyond what's already been done? For example, maybe one documentary that covers all 10.
Well, my answer is in multiple parts. This is not the first film we have made on the Japanese American incarceration experience. And I absolutely do not do this in isolation. I work with our company is called North Shore Productions, and we're an amazing team, and many people contributed to this film. Many of them are in the room right now. Many of them have contributed to the other films. There is a great film that I was a part of called Betrayed, Surviving an American Concentration Camp, which is also on PBS, which is a more global view of the incarceration experience. We have also made the film for Minidoka back when Hanako was at the National Park Service. We work very closely with Hanako on that. But no, I have not directly worked with other filmmakers outside of that ecosystem on this story.
Okay, so I know that Mike wanted to have the last word on this conversation, but I guess before we do that, is like maybe if anyone else has last words, we could kind of go down the line. Yeah. So any last words?
I kind of gave my last thoughts. I did want to share Larry Nakatsu. I had the privilege of when the Japanese American Nisei soldiers were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. There was an exhibition that toured the country, and I had the privilege of going to the kind of the initial inauguration of this tour, and that happened at the World War II Museum in New Orleans, and his father was still alive at that time. And the film talks about these Nisei soldiers who served. Many of them came right out of the camps, fought and died for a country that had turned their backs on them. And to this day, they are still the most decorated unit in U.S. military history for their size and length of service. And I had 9 uncles and my father that served, and an aunt that was a WAC. They served in these 3 segregated units, the MIS, the Military Intelligence Service, the 442, and the 100th. And I do want to mention there is an exhibition that's getting ready to be kicked off next month in San Francisco. It's about the Nisei soldiers. I Am an American, the Nisei soldier experience. It's going to, I think, like 13 different cities. It will be here in Portland at the Oregon Historical Society next year. So it's really not to be missed, and certainly sheds light on this really incredible story.
So I said that I talked about how I went to visit camp with my mom and her family. Many years later, that experience was so powerful, I decided that we're going back again, and I'm going to bring my children and my family to visit with my mom. Was there too. I felt that was important for us to pass on the knowledge, just like you made our film that's helping us understand. But I don't feel it's 100% up to me to decide how my children think about camp, how they interpret it, because they are a different generation than me. They think completely differently, but I feel it's my responsibility, and then let's say all of our responsibility, right? And some people have shown up and done this to pass on that knowledge so that they can make an informed decision and decide what it means to them. Me bringing them to that site, having them stand on the place where their grandmother lived forcibly, right? She was only like 8 years old when she was locked up there, right? And they didn't I don't know if it fully sank in at the moment, right? Because they were like 10, right? And like 13, but I gave them the opportunity, right? And they will never forget it. They went back a few years later because Amache did this partnership with the Sand Creek Massacre site, because there are two kind of national park places, historical sites, I guess, that are really close by. And so a few years later, we went back with my kids, and it was called this Youth Ambassador Program, where half of them were Sand Creek Massacre descendants, so Arapaho and Cheyenne descendants, youth, and half of them were Amache descendants. And we spent 3 days at Amache learning about Amache. We spent 3 days at the Sand Creek Massacre site learning about their culture and learning both historically those bad places, right? And they spent learning from those children. They spent time learning from the Cheyenne and Arapaho elders, and just really learning about each other, and kind of answer the question that was asked earlier about how do we learn to get along. That's part of it, right? Getting to know people from diverse backgrounds that have completely different views. It was completely mind-blowing, that experience, really getting to be welcomed into this completely different kind of family, this completely different kind of experience. The way they interpret tragedy and hardship is completely different from our notion, at least my notion, of how they experience it. And I think that was really important part of their journey, right? To becoming just well-rounded adults that can really contribute to the society.
I'm going to defer to Mike here. I think he's going to be the most profound.
I said thank you a lot to y'all, but I'll say it again. And let me close with this thought. This country has a history that's consistent, and it's about elimination of Native folks, incarceration of people who are different, newcomers to this country. It's not only Asian Americans, blacks, and Latinos, and it's Eastern Europeans, it's Jews, it's Christians, different kinds of Christians. They've all met with ethnic and religious resistance by those who were here before. And so it's a common thread that we all have. It's just that we don't teach our kids, or we don't share it within our own families. But there isn't a group in this country, a diaspora in this country, that hasn't faced some sort of discrimination and some sort of second class, blend in, lose your culture, forget your language, and be an American. So I think we need to remember that our histories may look different, but we're all sharing the same bedspread, I guess you would call it, that there's a commonality that draws us together. And the fact that we passed the apology law didn't mean that incarceration and the government making a mistake again wouldn't happen. It can and has happened, and it will happen continuously. And all that is legal based upon certain laws that we have, but it's not constitutional. And so we teach our youngsters the difference to become a little bit more critical consumers of information and try to process that. And I suspect that those of you who are in this room have already done that, but we have to share that all across this country and make a good example of what it looks like to be able to exercise our citizenship and say that there are laws on the books right now that needs to be eliminated. And I want to leave with you, the Alien Enemy Act of 1798 is a law that's still on the books, that was passed by President Adams, and there was 4 parts to it. 2 of them sunsetted, 1 was repealed, and this still remains. And it allows the president, when Congress declares war, to be able to set aside Amendments 5 and 14, due process and equal protection. And it also allows the president to set aside the constitutional protection that we have for ourselves. And that's wrong. That law has to be repealed, and you have to call your senator and your congresspersons to get on that bill, HR, I think it's 639, and Senate Bill 630. And make sure that's eliminated so that the executive branch cannot use that law with impunity. And if you eliminate that, it takes away the legality of what the executive branch is doing today. And so, and if we can do that, then it makes the apology a little bit more meaningful and a little bit more powerful, and it provide more protection for our newcomers and for those who are pushing back on our government because what the government is doing is wrong. And so we have to protect ourselves by exercising our citizenship responsibility. So again, to all of you, thank you for being here.
Well, with that, we got some good instructions from Mike Honda to move forward. There's resources online at amachefilm.com where you could get some of the resources there. If you want to learn more about the Japanese American incarceration history, you could come down to the Japanese American Museum of Oregon to come take a look. We're open Wednesdays through Sundays. And then we also have some upcoming programs coming up. So February 16th, we're going to be partnering with the Portland JACL and doing 2 screenings of Farewell to Manzanar. This is actually the 50th anniversary of that film, and we're gonna have a panel discussion afterwards with some folks. So February 16th at 2 o'clock and at 6 o'clock. Tickets go on sale tomorrow at Portland 5. It's gonna be down at the Winning Set. And then on February 19th, we're doing a partnership. It's called Book Club is Wine Club with the Oregon Historical Society, where we have sponsors at Fee Wineries will be providing wine to do a book club discussion on Farewell to Manzanar as well. And then JAMA will also have an opening of our newest exhibit on February 21st for the public. And that is going to be on the 25th anniversary of Minidoka National Historic Site. So it's called Minidoka on Our Minds, so we'll be featuring some pieces there. That's a nod to Roger Shimamura, as he had a whole series called Minidoka on My Mind. So thank you, Alicia and McMinimans, for hosting us. And then also the Oregon Historical Society as well. And I believe that this is being recorded and will be available online eventually. So thank you all. Thank you to the panelists for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you to all of you. And thanks everyone for coming.
Good job.
I mean, it's just so thank you for
John Hopper.